team. Okay. Very conflicted.
All right. Honorable Atandi, if you are to reflect back on how the appointment of the previous commission was done in 2016 actually, it was through the product of a joint select committee of National Assembly and the Senate that gave us Wafula Chebukati and 6 other commissioners. Of course, 4 later resigned by April of 2018. Then Cherera 4 appointed. If you look at the composition of the selection panel, you could see the hands of your party leader, Raila Odinga, and Uhuru Kenyatta, the president at that time. So this time around, as you're calling for inclusive recruitment of the IEBC, what is this that you know that has to be avoided this time around as you go to picking new commissioners?
First of all, Sam, you remember that we recently amended the law that guides the appointment of IEBC commissioners in Parliament, and some you remember that there was a lot of disagreements when the law was being passed in both National Assembly and the Senate, and the government insisted that certain aspects of certain institutions needed to appoint people. We have, like, one of the areas that we disagreed more fundamentally was the provision that PSC needs to nominate panelists. So the whole process of that law, was a one-sided legislation, and that is one of the things that we are saying. If indeed you believe that elections need to be credible in a country, and that the role of IEBC, whoever is appointed, does not matter, then why do you insist that this is the way it must be done without proper consultation? So I think that is really what we are talking about. And two, Sam, is that we now know, that elections in Kenya, for you to become the President of the Republic of Kenya, you need to have the IEBC on your side. That is what is coming out. I look at elections in other countries, like in the Western world. I don't think there is always a debate about who sits in these commissions, or who is in charge of the elections, because the elections are ordinarily credible. So in our case, we know that the commissioners are the ones that determine who is to be elected in what position. And that is why, even if you look at what is happening now, President Ruto is insisting that he must have his way, because he knows once he has his way, then of course he's assured of his second term. So these are some of the things that we need to thrash out.
So explain to me,
IEBC as an institution that is credible, that even, yes.
Explain to me how the president has insisted that he has to have his way, yet you yourselves as parliamentarians, you're in the House as you passed this new law. You have enumerated how different bodies are going to pick the panelists. So how will he, and secondly, when you're calling for consultations, how do you want that done? Yes.
Sam, there's something that you always you have refused to accept. You have refused to accept that, first of all, the president has bought many MPs on his side. Either he has bought or he has been able to get a lot of MPs to be on his side because of state power. This is something which you need to accept. And MPs shift their allegiance to the presidency, the side of the presidency, whether and they do not take into account the opinion of their voters. So today you find so many MPs are angling to be on the side of government. But the good thing, Sam, is that their constituents have not shifted. So we are having a situation where you are elected on a Jubilee party or on a Azimio party, but you have decided to incline yourself to the side of the government, and that's the situation we are facing right now in Parliament. So that people are supporting the presidency, members of Parliament are supporting the presidency, irrespective of their political parties. So in the process, we cannot get justice in the National Assembly or in the Senate. That is a fact.
And I hear you, Honorable Atandi. I hear you, but are you questioning the process of arriving at that amendment to the IEBC Act? Is that what you're faulting?
Yes, I'm questioning that. I'm questioning that because if we were in a truly democratic situation where we believe in national inclusivity and consultations, then we would have had a situation where Azimio leadership and the KK leadership were engaged in external consultations and making an agreement. And then that agreement, which is done outside by the political parties, is what is passed in Parliament.
So what would you have wanted to see?
That has been done in the past.
Which
with
agencies,
positive results.
Which formula would you have wanted to see in reconstituting, in picking a selection panel?
I would have wanted a formula where political parties constituting National Assembly, the two coalitions sit together and then they agree on institutions that should select. That means Raila Odinga and William Ruto would have sat together in a bipartisan manner and they agree on who should sit in the panel to identify IEBC commissioners.
And what do you think? What is your reflection?
The IPPG, you remember the IPPG SAM formula?
Yes, I've read about it.
That was touted as one of the most credible formulas that has been used in the past. I would have wanted it at this juncture, given some that we went through an election that divided the country in the middle. This was really the best way for us, to move. And some, when William Ruto was appointed as the president, became the president of Kenya, he started very well, Sam. And even when he came to our region at Nyanza, we welcomed him because at that juncture we were seeing a president who is interested in uniting the country. And Sam, if he continued that way, but somehow Sam, at this juncture, even if you look at the speeches that they made yesterday in Narok, those are not speeches of people who are interested in making this country a great country.
Honorable Tandi, allow me to ask this. Allow me to ask this because you are saying that the selection panel of picking new IEBC commissioners should have been a discussion between Raila Odinga and William Ruto. Do you actually believe that as a lawmaker in this country, and you know the history of constituting of such kind of organizations, you know the process that went into in coming up with the current IEBC even in the constitution, do you actually feel strongly that we should actually leave it to William Ruto and Raila Odinga?
Of course, William Ruto is a leader. He's a leader of Kenya Kwanza coalition, and Raila Odinga is the leader of Azimio coalition. What is wrong with that? These are the two political, the two great political leaders that are running politics in this country. That was actually the best way to do it.
Titus, how do you deal with this moving into the future? Because there has to be a commission, and we have had how many elections under IEBC? 3. All of them disputed. So what do we do to make sure that we don't have similar challenges in 2027?
Sam, I have said it time without number that it does not matter how the referee is put in place in terms of managing our elections. Because regardless of how they are appointed, whether you decide to pursue the IPPG, whether you try to pursue the model that was there before the recent amendment of the IEBC Act, or even if you decide to pursue now the model that has been brought about by this IEBC Amendment Act. One thing that I've said before is that elections and the reaction of the election results is always a perception. The person who wins the elections at the end of the process will always praise the IEBC. But the person who loses the election will always say IEBC was unfair, there are certain factors that I did not agree with, and so on and so forth. I will ask you a question. If today Azimio led, or Azimio was declared the winner, will we be witnessing these complaints or these grievances that they're bringing about? Definitely not. Today, if you ask Atandi,
would they be coming from the other side?
Definitely, because they have lost. Today, Honorable Atandi is sitting here and saying that there is the IEBC as constituted then was extremely detrimental to conducting elections. He's saying the presidential elections were bungled and so on and so forth. But it's the same IEBC that declared him the MP. So when it gets to that point, he draws the line. But most importantly, I've also heard him say that William Ruto and Honorable Raila Odinga ought to have sat together in order to agree. So the question that begs to be answered is an election process in Kenya an exclusive preserve of the big political parties in Kenya? What about the independent candidates? What about interreligious groups? What about professional bodies like LSK? Who will take care of the interest of the minorities? So regardless of how the IEBC is reconstituted, what is more important is that we need to have a credible dispute resolution mechanism, which in the event that any of the players in an election is dissatisfied, then they can approach this dispute resolution mechanism, present their grievances, and once a determination has been rendered, that becomes the finality which binds upon us. So right now, as it stands, we have the Supreme Court, we have got so many tribunals that are set up to deal with pre and post nomination disputes, and they are addressed in the law. So for me, this issue of saying that we need to change the IEBC, the select panel here and there, this is a wild goose chase that will proceed or will go on to infinity. What is important is let us believe in the dispute resolution mechanism that has been set in the Constitution, such that even if you do not agree with the person sitting or heading the IEBC, you can approach the court and put up your grievances. And also, once the court has determined, or the dispute resolution mechanism forum has determined, that becomes the end of the process.
And Daktari,
yes.
Look, once the president declares vacancies, because already there are 5 positions of commissioners that are open, and that of the chair, even as we wait for Masit's fate. But once he declares, then the law sets in motion the procedures that are supposed to be followed. Within 7 days, there has to be the nominating bodies submitting names to the Parliamentary Service Commission, and thereafter the president will appoint and gazette the selection panel. So what is the place of negotiations before forming a recruitment panel? And if you're to reflect on what happened in the recruitment of the Cherera 4, because the panelists that are nominated by Parliamentary Service Commission, clearly you could see it's a split between ODM and the Jubilee Party at that time, Jubilee wing of Uhuru Kenyatta. How do you make sure that you don't end up in such a situation that after the election you have a whole commission that is divided down the middle, despite the inclusivity that Honorable Atandi may want?
It's so direct. The problem, in my view, is not that of IEBC. It's more about the nature of our politics that is inherently partisan, that still has elements of winner takes all. And so you foresee a situation where, even if it was Azimio in government, you easily foresee a situation where the Kenya Kwanza people will complain about reconstitution of IEBC and all that. Sam, I think it's important, and I think it's very, very important that the 2 political formations consult, informally for sure, because the formal appointment is a preserve of the office of the president, and that, by and large, should be a ceremonial role after the panel does the interviews and all that. And of course, you expect the panel, in an ideal sense, to get us the best of commissioners for a formal appointment by the president. But in real-world politics, you also expect them to, do a bit of horse trading here, be directed here and there, and that happened with the Cherera 4, unless we are in denial. And I foresee it happening the 6 vacancies that are about to be declared. But I think we need to be progressive. I can understand concerns of Honorable Atandi, and I can also understand concerns of Titus here, who, by the way, was my university. We were in the university together, so I've known him for some time, and I know he means well. So I understand their concerns. But I think that Kenya needs to be progressive by investing in things that then enhance transparency of elections, so that we depersonalize elections. And I think that holistic reforms that need to take place should be focused more on technology. how do we deploy deliberate technology to enhance transparency of elections, so that even if there are mechanisms for, dispute resolution, including going to the Supreme Court and all that, they don't have to be triggered if elections through technology is free and fair. Remember, we have this not so good reputation in the world that every election under this constitution has been contested, has gone to court, and the country kind of is held at ransom, so to speak, for 1 month or so, trying to wait for the ladies and gentlemen of the Supreme Court to then give us direction. And obviously, we will not agree with their position. About half will agree, about half will not agree. And in the process, we are kind of misusing, in my view, the role of the Supreme Court in the entire electoral process. So conversation should move beyond just reconstitution of IEBC, beyond the commissioners, to deliberate embedding of technology in enhancing transparency, depersonalize elections. Elections should.
Yet those decisions will have to be made by a commission which will have been picked through a certain process which already attended is disputed. Which
is why consultation is also so important. The political players, the main formation, the Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, ought to consult. Because you remember, Sam, once you are elected, you want to enjoy the legitimacy. You want to deliver on your mandate. Even as
but tell me, Wakili, because Parliamentary Service Commission 2 slots, Public Service Commission 1 slot, Political Parties Liaison Committee one slot, ICRK 2, LSK 1. So you're consulting to do what? I'm a member of LSK. Yeah.
And I know how LSK normally comes up with these nominees for various bodies. It is not as professional as you expect it to be. The idea of having a panel that is a bit representative was, of course, a good idea, that we have all sectors of the society represented. But we also know church in Kenya is a conflicted institution. We go to these churches. We know LSK is a political body. We know where they stand.
So if you have William Ruto...
we know who controls Public Service Commission. Unless you are not living in Kenya, we know who controls Parliamentary Service Commission as well. So we know these guys. We know whose bidding they're going to do.
And therefore the question, because the council members of LSK will decide who to send to the selection panel. The Interreligious Council is going to pick their own.
Yes.
The PPLC, the political parties will come together and pick one. The Public Service Commission, despite the control, will pick one.
Yes.
The Parliamentary Service Commission, despite the control, will pick two. So where does William Ruto and Raila Odinga come in? Is it them? Is it then them determining who goes to the selection panel, and then doesn't that defeat the logic of even having that in law?
Some remember you and I can also be in this panel and pick very good commissioners, but still there will be no concurrence, there will be no agreement in terms of whether the commissioners are able to conduct free and fair elections, which is why I'm keen on us talking about holistic reforms. Holistic reforms cannot be done by the IEBC itself. It has to involve political players. It has to involve procurement of relevant technology. And by the way, I know of 2-3 Kenyans who are hired all over Africa to conduct credible elections, but when they apply to be IEBC commissioners in Kenya, on 3 occasions, they have not been recruited. Very smart IT guys. So you can tell that this thing is messed up from day one.
What is the reason they're never hired?
For obvious reasons. Probably they don't kowtow to the political formations. They're just professionals.
So for them to be there, they're supposed to be political consultations or what?
I know. For them to be there, for you to get the right commissioners, you need to have political parties talking together, agreeing on a set of reforms, most importantly, depersonalizing IEBC. We should not be talking about Chebukati for 6 years. We should be talking about technology. How did it facilitate elections to be free and fair in my polling station, say Kilimani Primary? So the entire dispute about elections should end at the polling station.
Okay.
If we have the right technology, if we depersonalize it, but importantly, if political leaders consult. Because, by the way, it is in the interest of President Ruto and Ms. Odinga to talk.
Okay, we'll get back to that, but Honorable Atandi needs to take a break from this conversation. But before you do, Honorable Atandi, what if the consultations you're calling for do not happen and the President goes ahead to declare the vacancies and the bodies that are in the law go ahead to nominate the membership to the selection panel without any reference to Raila Odinga, then what?
There will be a political crisis in the country, and the political crisis is going to affect governance, is going to affect delivery of services, and the country basically will be ungovernable for those who have taken over the reins of power. So if you have taken over the reins of power, you have a responsibility to ensure that the country is run and Kenyans live peacefully, and if there's any problem, it is resolved. So we urge them to ensure that the country is not allowed to get to the stage of political and crisis that will not be able to be managed.
Right. Honorable Atandi, I don't know if you have anything to add, because I want to release you.
I wanted to say some that we want to urge the President William Ruto. He has taken over the instruments of governance and is a symbol of national unity. And so we want to urge him to be magnanimous, together with his deputy, to ensure that they now become leaders of this country. What I see the two do each and every day is that they are still engaged in political campaigns. I don't know where they're getting time to campaign. Let them begin the process of governance so that they can engage in two things: consultations with the people of Kenya towards a united country, where Kenyans work together, politically, socially, economically, etc. Secondly, there is this issue of cost of living, which is a crisis, and we have discussed it here some. I don't understand why the president says they received a battered economy. They received an economy which was destroyed. But when you take over reins of power and you find an economy has been destroyed, how then where do you get the gas to begin to tax that same economy? You begin to introduce higher taxes. I thought if you find an economy has been destroyed, I thought the first thing you should do is to build that economy first. So we want to urge the president to build the economy first before they can begin to tax Kenyans. You don't tax a sick person. You treat that person first before you begin to tax them. So this is my final submission on this question of cost of living. We want to urge the government to build the economy before you can begin to tax people, because when you tax us, you are going to kill us.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Honorable Samatandi. You've said a couple of things there, including that the president needs to now start governing and stop engaging in politics. But I'm just wondering what happens, because half the time they're responding to the allegations raised by the side of Samuel Atandi. But thank you so much for making time for us, and all the best in your endeavors today. I want us to take a look at some of the feedback that has come to us via Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is Daybreak. And Ephantus Mutiga is saying that, well, he's just left, that ask him, who is this whistleblower who can't come out in public and explain what really happened? Two, where was this whistleblower during Supreme Court hearings? I believe this was the best avenue to share his evidence. Otherwise, this is hot air. There is Ephantus. As someone else, Engineer Lazaro is saying that we are tired of witnessing exchange of salvos between the opposition and the current regime. UN or Commonwealth should force both sides to stop chest thumping and unending pointing fingers at each other. You can't run a nation minus some parts. Okay. Bob Otieno, let the reconstitution of IEBC go on as per the Kriegler report and not waste this an early opportunity window we have before next elections. Anybody against it now is not a reformist. Mugasi, an audit of 2022 electoral system by UN and Commonwealth is a good step to restore confidence in our electoral process. If President Ruto believes the child is his, then he wouldn't oppose the DNA test. Okay. Okelo Mwalimu, the worst mistake any sitting president in sub-Saharan Africa can do is to try ignore Raila and attempt to dismiss his influence. Will Ruto succeed where Moi, Kibaki and Uhuru failed? The answer is no. The president must be properly guided by his advisors. Then Nesh asked the Azimio representative why they didn't reveal the House visits before the election day, if at all there were such visits, or why did they participate in the election, knowing very well they weren't the highest bidders. Whoa. Godi Baraza, the country is trying to find its way to economic stability and fighting hunger occasioned by the ravaging drought. Raila Odinga's rallies have extremely come at a wrong time. Kenyans want real service delivery, not chaos and grandstanding. Okay. You're fine. So, Dr. Komolo, as you come to the end of the conversation, of course, we know that the DCI is looking into those numbers from the whistleblower, but it appears that the terms of reference are to the question of whether there was any forging involved, not really looking at the veracity. Maybe it's because it's not within his mandate, but looking at the documents that have been presented, are they credible? Was there forging? Such kind of conversation. Where should that end at a time there is still not an agreed position on what the fate of that should be?
The whistleblower, whatever is worth, it's only helping Azimio team to further the debate on electoral injustice in Kenya. But remember, the Constitution outlines how you resolve disputes around elections and results, and that is already exhausted. So for whatever it's worth, I don't think that in terms of law it's of any substance, and I'm not sure whether it's credible or not. There were certainly some malpractices in the elections, but I also doubt over 3 million votes. That seems to me to be on the higher side. Between Raila and Ruto. Manipulating 3 million votes requires a lot of effort that I think should have been detected by Azimio side, if at all they had structures to monitor their votes. So I don't know where to put it. I don't think that 3 million votes, allegation 3 million votes, is credible. But it takes me back to the bigger conversation that we need to have. What kind of reforms should IEBC put in place to ensure that these issues don't arise again in 2027? And I go back to my answer, technology. Okay. Embrace technology, involve stakeholders at all levels. Don't just stamp either side, by the way, because elections are really about us. And when the country is unstable after elections, then everyone loses, and we lose broader conversation about taking Kenya forward. So the president should not just stamp, Mr. Odinga should not just stamp, and of course their lieutenants should also not just stamp. They should have a mechanism for engaging and reforming IEBC in a holistic way, not entirely about the commissioners, but importantly, agreeing on every aspect of technology to be integrated in elections in 2027. And of course, this must start early. Other things that are coming up that, of course, we are behind is boundaries review. This should even start, we should even start discussing that now as opposed to waiting for far too long, because the Constitution anticipates review every 10 years or so. So there are bigger issues. And of course, we still expect the government to deliver on its mandate. Reforms of IEBC is just one thing. They promise so many things. Particularly of interest to me is facilitating devolution to be actualized in full, transferring all those functions that have been devolved but they are still clinging on to. Funding county governments and holding them responsible in terms of funding, but also in terms of implementation of devolved functions. Right. And of course, where there's a need for recruitment into a public office, be representative. Don't appear to be favoring one region as opposed to the other, so that all of us professionals who also want to work for the government, by the way, have a fair chance. At the moment, I think Titus and I almost feel excluded. Even we shy from applying because you're almost certain that once they Google you, then they have an idea or two about your village, then you're not going to get the job. So we want the government that's representative.
Titus may tell you, speak for yourself. but Titus, as you close, yes. How then should people take responsibility? Because if you're to go through an election financed by the taxpayer himself, the agencies that are responsible for managing it give us an outcome, it is taken through the dispute resolution mechanism, then you have a new set of results that the DCI now is having now to look into, but not on the credibility, but on whether there was any forgery. who should take responsibility of what goes to the public?
Now, I believe every stakeholder and participant that takes place or has seats at the table of the political scene must take political responsibility. And it is a high time that we start trusting and believing and trying to support the legal and the infrastructural systems that we've put in place through the law to manage our elections. Because the debate that is going on, the antagonistic whimpers that we are witnessing, these are things that can go on to infinity, depending on whose side the results are favored to. But if everybody trusts in the system that have been set in place by the law, I don't think we will be moving towards the right direction, because the process of amending, repealing, and changing the law, it can go on to infinity. Right. But if people start trusting the institutions that have been set up in the Constitution, and even if there are changes to be made, then those changes ought to be effected within the legal purview that the Constitution provides for. That is the only way that now accountability can come in.
All right, Titus Mahanu, an advocate of the High Court, Dr. Eric Komolo, an advocate of the High Court, and does also many other things. I want to head Samatandi, who is the Member of Parliament for Lagos Songa, joining the conversation. Thank you, the three of you, and also you, the viewer, for sharing your feedback. We'll continue to raise questions and also to have an understanding of the steps that are being taken. Of course, there's a very important assignment that Dr. Komolo has referred to, that is on the boundaries review. The last boundaries were gazetted in February it was in March 2012. So 12 years end March 2024. I don't know what should happen if the country will not have concluded the process of gazetting new boundaries by that time, but they will be crucial for the 2027 election. My name is Sam Gituku. Up next is Sporting Monday. See you some other time. Bye for now.